Arc Raiders is set to launch here in just a few days, and we just had some brand new exclusive developer interviews, as well as a ton of other dev comments, and those go over the scope test versus the launch, where yes, you only played 10 to 15%, so we'll cover what wasn't there at the test and what more to expect come launch. We got a ton to talk about. What's up, World Utopia, here back in with another video. Today we're checking out all things Arc Raiders. So first off here, we have the launch overview and just kind of what we're seeing here. That way we can kind of build upon that. Of course, the launch and release date is set for October 30th, with the scope of the test versus the launch, as I mentioned in the intro, is around 10 to 15% of the total progression. So to break down what we'll be covering is more maps, the gear tiers, quests, and even systems. Where first off here, we have the maps, zones, and progressions. So what you played in the Server Slam test was Damn Battlegrounds, of course. Now you were able to play the Night Raid as well as the regular raid, and they did have mostly all the conditional variants located for that map that you could play. Again, Night Storms, Electromagnetic Storms, the Dynamic Event Reshuffling. However, what you didn't play there, and actually some differences even from Tech Test 2. So I was actually somebody that played Tech Test 1 and Tech Test 2 as well as the Server Slam. I can't talk about much about the Tech Test 1 as that one is still technically under NDA, but what I can say is that Tech Test 2 did offer these maps here, which was Damn Battlegrounds, Buried City, and the Spaceport. So we got those maps, and that one wasn't under NDA, it was just a closed test, where during the Server Slam you actually were only allocated the one map. However, with launch, we did get finally the confirmation and rumored Blue Gate map. Now recently, we actually did get new imagery for Blue Gate. That was dropped by Embark Osen, who is the community lead for Arc Raiders. She goes on here to say that Blue Gate was an early concept art exploring the vast infrastructures of the Exodus era, and that essentially was constructed to support the major facilities scattered across the Rust Bolt. They wanted to design a map located on the region's edge. Obviously from the world map, all of these kind of areas are technically connected somehow. We'll get into even how that kind of works a little bit later, where they are saying that serving as a kind of border to the lands beyond. It's to contrast the heavy, brutalist concrete aesthetic of Tunnel Gates, where they chose a lush green biome that stands apart from other maps. So yeah, as you can see here, we get some sort of almost like foresty area, but that does lead into that concrete construction part of the zone. We even have these like diverse tunnels that they showcase in here, where it does look like they kind of are both mixing the open world area as well as some nice inside structures, which look a lot more spacious than other maps. And even here are some more distinguished landmarks, things that we certainly haven't seen on the other maps as of yet. Now, that wasn't all there. We had a secret local tease right now. This one has been talked about. I've talked about it previously, but that is the Stella Mantis. Now, in the dev interview, they actually detailed that this is a gated hidden access area, and it's actually intended as a mystery for players to unlock. So super interesting there. I kind of have my own ideas on this. I honestly think this might almost be like the Tarkov concept of like traversing to another map within a map. And I feel like maybe it's somehow connected to Blue Gate, or it's connected somehow to one of the other maps. Now, of course, this wasn't showcased on any world map that we did see, so it doesn't seem like there's a way to unlock it just from the map section. That's kind of my philosophy around it. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure there. I'm sure there's maybe some puzzle mechanic to it. We'll have to wait and see, of course. Now, other than the maps, you might be wondering how much progression did we actually get, at least pertaining from the Server Slam to how launch is going to be. Well, they actually do say here that the Slam, other than it being the 10% number, was capped around 5 hours, essentially giving you around 5 hours of content, where launch is going to add a ton of higher rarity, more attachments, more enemy types, quest lines, deeper runs. And again, when you do attribute that to Tech Test 2, there actually was quite a lot more. That was why players were saying, hey, there's a ton more content there. And I can attest to that too, attributing to Tech Test 2 and kind of how it was with the Server Slam. There was a ton of materials that you actually got in the game that you really could have used for crafting. A lot of the green, blue tier, T2, T3 mats weren't actually utilized during the Server Slam, whereas in the Tech Test, you actually could get far enough to upgrade a lot of things. So you kind of see how much more utilization you'll get from the loot as well. As they did mention, you really only got the early stages, like early stages of the actual game, where the game director did say it was around 5 hours, so attributing that to the 10 to 15% mark. We're looking at around 40 to 50 hours plus of content, things that we really didn't get. But then you're also attributing into the gameplay loop. So really that's just kind of like achieving like some sort of end goal there. Of course there's going to be more content than just that, but that's just kind of playing into the quest line deep run routes. There was also a few other systems that weren't unlockable in the server slam. That include lore, gear, and attachments where they broke down the progression feel. So things like the codex system that was not accessible, where you can unlock evolving entries for arcs, NPCs, locations, and events as you progress. There's also attachment rarities like legendary attachments that can transform your weapon behavior, your sidearm variants that can change firing weapon, and a wider attachment pool and rarities at launch versus the test slice. There's also some additional tooling here like the zip lines, cloak, and shroud, and other utilities that expand your traversal stealth options. Which actually does lead us on here and kind of plays in part with the combat and performance fixes. I have gone over these already, they had a whole blog post about that, but there was a few other details in the dev interview. We're kind of comparing from post-slam to day one. The flying arc drones will get a vision nerf, so they have gone ahead, adjusted the detection. There's no more seeing through foliage, but they are still dangerous but fair. The dam tower access exploit was fixed, with high value towers that now require intended approaches, so you do get a bit more risk to reward there. Of course, they've done a stability pass here, crash and server fixes that have been across platforms, and a day one patch to target smoother sessions. If we look at the Steam database, they actually are updating the game daily, but as of right now, these are just with store tags, and I can't see as of yet if we've gotten any day one patches posted to it. Of course, I will keep you guys updated when we do get that day one patch officiated. Also, for those that did, and even myself, talk about the graphic downgrade that happened in the server slam, which was, again, noticeable in Tech Dust 2, there was some visual defaults that were used as conservative defaults. However, here, their launch tuning aims for better fidelity and performance balance. So it does look like hopefully they're going to be restoring the Tech Test 2 graphics setting. Now, they actually did detail a little bit about the live ops and roadmap vision. Again, I did talk about this in my previous video, but they have framed this game as a 10-year game. So expect new maps, enemies, weapons, and quest lines over time, and they are doing a flexible early cadence here. So they're not doing any hard seasonal promise at launch, but the devs will observe engagement over time and drop content accordingly. Now for platform and PC tech, we already basically did see this in the tech test as well as the server slam, but there is DLSS 4 and reflex support, and day one drivers that are targeted to focus on latency and stability. Also really cool here, a note, GeForce Now will have day one streaming support. In fact, server slam was actually supposed to be playable through GeForce Now, but unfortunately due to some delays, they couldn't make it happen. Now there was some additional notes here about matchmaking, the onboarding, and even player feedback from the server slam. The first one here is matchmaking. So I know a lot of you have had questions, what about solo queue and kind of like the group queue? Well, solo queue is actually prioritized here, and it is separate from a pre-made squad. They're going to monitor those dials post-launch to make sure it is heavily kind of prioritizing solo queue. So there technically is a bit of solo queuing there. When you do queue as a solo, it's going to prioritize you to play with other solo players. There is one note here though, there is no gear score MM. Lobbies are not sorted by your equipment level. Sometimes this does happen with certain games, and I would potentially like to maybe see in the future some sort of gear score MM, but I would like that to be a hard cap or soft cap lock. Essentially what I mean there and what some games do is they have a minimum gear score requirement in a certain queue. So like this would be a separate queue, it would be like hardcore mode, and you would need, for example, let's say like 12,000 gear score in order to queue into this mode. I would kind of like to see that. A lot of other games and even extraction shooters do have that. I would love to see something like that, so it's not like based on your gear score to match you with gear score equipped levels. However, you'd have to have like a minimum set value in order to queue into a specific mode. That specific mode would have higher tier loot or harder enemies. Those are usually really fun and actually do have like a better skill average for players. And so I actually do see that boding well for the game. I don't think it needs it at launch per se because people are still going to be trying to gear up and get that ready. But I would love to see that sooner than later. So hoping they might change their mind here, not pertaining to gear score matchmaking, but essentially having a soft or hard cap matchmaking where you need to meet a certain requirement in order to queue into a harder lobby. Those are actually really fun in some other games I played, so I would like them to look into that. Also here with the kind of onboarding and player feedback, they do kind of want to add some more onboarding to fill those gaps. They want to add tutorial beats for ping and comm wheel. Yeah, we didn't really get that in the beginning stage. Also helping with dodge roll, because some players don't even know that you can dodge roll, and even team up invites or loot pinging, as well as some UI nudges, more explicit prompts, controller, KBM, diagrams to reduce didn't know it existed moments. As I mentioned, a lot of players didn't even know that you could dodge roll. So yeah, things like that I definitely think could help with the onboarding experience. I want to jump here. We have some community mentions, nothing too crazy. The one here is I was actually looking at the Embark merch page recently for the finals, and not surprising, but surprising, they actually do have an Arc Raiders page. It isn't up just yet. It's on the Coming Soon tab right here, but I just figured I'd mention that in case you guys wanted to be prepared for that. And if there is any updates with the merch store, of course I'll let you guys know. Overall, that's about covered for today's video, and if you enjoyed, like, subscribe. Until the next one, deuces.